Welcome to Allies or Enemies. I'm Jess.
And I am Sean, and we're going to do something a little bit different today. We thought we would just focus on one publisher, and because we noticed we got a bunch of games from them on our shelves, so we're going to talk about 5 games from AEG.
Yeah, this gives us a chance to talk about some games that are a little bit lighter, although one of them we did cover previously for a full review.
Yeah, we have talked about Cascadia, and we've talked about it a bunch, but it's interesting to talk about a whole bunch from one publisher at the same time, just because we noticed a lot of similarities between them in terms of weight, sometimes in terms of mechanics as well. So let's just dive into it. First up, we've got Santa Monica, designed by Josh Wood. And so Santa Monica, like its name might suggest, is a game where you are building a tableau, and that tableau is your boardwalk/beach area. So each turn you've got 4 or 8 cards, 2 rows of 4 cards that are in a marketplace, and you're drafting one of those cards and you're adding it to your tableau, either in the boardwalk area or in the beach area. And at the same time, you've also got these meeples that are townies and tourists and VIP. Usually there's one, sometimes 2. And you've got to move them around the town. The VIP's got to look at buildings. The townies and tourists have to get to various spots to play volleyball or do whatever beach activities that they need to do. Once you've built out your town, which is 14 cards plus your starting tableau space, you just add up the points that you got from those cards, and then also you compare that to the goals that come out at the beginning of the game. And that's basically the game.
Yeah, it is really, really simple because that is all you're doing is taking a card and adding it. And then sometimes the card might let you do certain things like add in the people, and now those people are on that card, or move people, or give you the sand dollars, which are your money. So it's quite quick in terms of turns and how you play. But there is a little bit of strategy in terms of aligning your card to match up with the point scores that are on the cards or what the different goals that come out each game are.
Yeah, and there's a few interesting things. It's interesting because there are a few different kind of routes to victory. So there are some cards that give you points just if they're next to another card. There are some cards that give you points if you can draw a line between a number of adjacent cards that have the same symbol. There's some cards that give you points if you move townies and tourists to them. And then there are cards that just give you kind of 1 point at a time as you move your VIP around them. And then there are also the shared goals. So there are a bunch of different ways to score the end game points too, but it's not too complex. Like, that stays fairly simple.
Yeah, and it is interesting that there are slightly like powers that you can use your sand dollars for that change up each game. And again, keeping it really simple, it might let you take a card from the back instead of only the front or whatever that might be. So enough that each game feels a little bit different, but still on a very basic kind of premise.
And it's super approachable rules wise, but it's also super approachable from just how it looks. It's just really pretty and like chill, and it's so beachy, and it's all of these nice kind of beach pinks and blues, and I love the look of it, and I generally like the components as well. The seashells. The one big knock on it is the box.
Yes, this box could be at least a quarter, maybe even smaller the size. So it is a bit frustrating that it comes in such a large box and there's only that much stuff in it. But the stuff in it is good, and it looks so pretty that you can only put out 14 cards. And almost every game we both do 7 beaches and 7 boardwalks because we just love how the town looks with having it aligned like that.
Yeah, I cannot bring myself to build it like asymmetrically. It needs to be perfectly aligned. I can't do it. Even if I would lose, I feel like I have to do that. And the box size thing is, I think you can still buy this game fairly cheap. Like, I don't think that the price has changed that much. It's just, we got a lot of games on our shelf. We would love to have smaller boxes to fit on our shelf.
It is surprising that we did pick this up because it has this bit of a vacation-y vibe, and we picked this up on vacation despite having such a large box. We got this when we were up in Edinburgh, and so it was really nice to get a game that feels like you're on vacation that we bought while we were on vacation.
And it's great too because it always it like evokes that feeling for me every single time we play it. So it's both in the cards and just kind of in that memory. And it's nice that board games do that too. But let's talk next about a game that is in the correct size box for what it is.
The next game is Point Salad, which is designed by Molly Johnson, Robert Melvin, and Sean Stankiewicz. And it, again, is a very simple card drafting game, but you start with 9 cards out, and 3 of those at the top are your scoring cards, and then the other 6 are vegetable cards. And on your turn, you can either take 1 scoring card or 2 vegetable cards. And that's it. So turns go really, really quickly, but the goal really is hopefully to align the vegetables you're getting with your scoring cards. And because the scoring cards are double-sided and they flip out any time to fill the roads, those cards are constantly changing. So throughout the game, you have to try and decide like, oh, that scoring card's really good, but I really want those 2 vegetables. Which one am I going to get? And so really simple decisions, but super, super interesting. Sometimes you only end up with a couple scoring cards, but like just the right vegetables. And other times you end up with tons of scoring cards that get you little points, but enough that, you can win with that.
Yeah, you got to be able to think on your feet, I feel like, in this game because those scoring cards are constantly changing. You're not going to get the stuff that you want to get as well. And we have been playing this. We've been playing this on BGA for basically since it came onto Board Game Arena, and AEG actually supplied us with this copy, so thank you for that. But it is definitely a game where I feel like some games I'm killing it and everything's aligning, and some games I feel like and it's usually when I play it almost backward, where I collect a whole bunch of 1 vegetable. And then I'm like, please, 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 I need a carrot scoring card. I need a carrot scoring card. I need one. And then someone takes my carrot scoring card, Dan. And then I end up with no points at all because I've got to suddenly totally change what I'm doing. So you do kind of have to get the scoring cards and then play to the scoring cards that you've got and just kind of, as you go, see how that scoring is evolving.
You definitely have to play like that because at 2 players, you're only using, I think, about 1/3 of the deck. So you don't even know what scoring cards are included because ideally, each time you set up, you separate your cards and then it's totally random which third you're going to get for that reason. If you play with 4, you're playing with almost all of them. If you play with 6, you're playing with all the cards. But even if you're trying to set yourself up for the card, the odds that it's going to be available when it's your turn is like no odds.
It's not, yeah, it's just not going to happen. But that does mean that you have to kind of sort the cards at the beginning of the game. So there is a little bit of, for what is such a simple game, there is a little bit of setup to it.
Yeah, and because they all play through until all the cards are gone, and that's why it has to do it. So it does involve a little bit. You could kind of preset your deck so you could play a couple times back to back at 2 players, but then you'll know which scoring cards aren't included, which isn't a big deal. But
I don't think that would help me, honestly. There's no way I'm card counting to that point. So you could definitely do that, and it is really a game that I don't know if we've ever just played once. It's a game that you're going to play a few times because it plays so fast. And I think really the situations where this game is probably going to shine is it's a great game if you're just hanging out with people, having a few drinks, because it's the sort of game that you can play without kind of your 100% of your focus, even though the scoring does take a little bit of mathing.
Yeah, that's where the BGA kind of helps you out with the scoring. It was nice to play that first, so then we were able to kind of get our heads around that a little bit. But it does play fairly differently at 2 versus higher player counts, I would say, because at 2, you have a good sense of what is out and what would likely still be out on your next turn, and that might influence your decision, because if there's like a lot of tomatoes out, you might take the tomato scoring card knowing that you can then get tomatoes on your next turn, or you can purposely try and look at what your opponent's trying to do and take things that is going to mess them up specifically.
Yeah. Whereas with 4, it's you don't know what's going to come up. It's all bets are off. People can mess with people, and they will, but you just kind of, you really have to play the hands as the cards as they are dealt, as they show up for you, and there isn't as much pre-planning involved. Although I like both.
Yeah.
I think maybe I like 2 a little bit more because I do like that head to head, but I think it works totally fine all the way from 2 to 6.
Yeah, because even at higher counts, the turns are so fast that is the nice thing at it. It still plays quite quickly.
The next one we're going to talk about is also supplied by the publisher, and this is Tiny Towns, and is designed by Peter McPherson. And in Tiny Towns, really you're trying to build a little town, and how you do that is each turn you're going to name one of the resources, whatever it might be, and you're going to put that down anywhere in your section. Everyone else has to do it too. And the reason you are doing that is you're trying to build these different buildings, and each building has a different kind of recipe. So that's a number of different specific resources that it needs in a specific shape, and kind of little Tetris shapes. And once you've made that shape of resources, you pick all of those up and you put down the building in one of those shapes. And each one of those scores differently. So some of those score based on adjacency, some of those are going to score based on the number of buildings that you have in town. And basically you just keep doing that. You go around the table, each person chooses a resource, and you put those as best you can until you've run out of space, either by building all your buildings or by building most of your buildings and having the other spaces filled up with resources.
I think that is the tricky bit, is those resources are stuck there. That is it. So you do end up in situations where you have to put down a cube, and the only space you have, because you're about to finish another building, so everything's taken, is to put it somewhere where you know it means that one and like the one next to it now there's just nothing that you can build. But you have to put that down in one of those available spaces, even if it wrecks your plan and it means that you can't build what you're going to build, and now it's just going to be negative points at the end for that cube, and possibly other cubes that are now kind of useless based on the placement of that one.
Yeah, you can probably tell from just talking about it, this game can be a little bit frustrating, and it can be surprisingly mean for the cute animals that are on the front here. And the animals don't really show up. This is a very abstract game inside of the box. That said, I still generally enjoy the puzzle that is here, and it is definitely one of those games where you, again, like we talked about with Point Salad, where you've got to be able to change your focus and change your plan as you're going. You can't always do that though, and it is going to be frustrating sometimes, and you can definitely, and I've done this to Jess before, where I've played like 6 wood in a row and she's ready to jump over the table at me. So you definitely can play mean if you want to play mean as well.
And so on that note, there is another way to play that I prefer for exactly that reason, which is it comes with a deck of cards of the resources. So instead of each person taking it in turns calling out a resource, you flip 2 cards, and then your third resource, everyone gets to pick their own. And I really like that because you get a bit of a sense of the kind of likelihood of a certain resource coming up based on how many cards have been flipped, and you know the third resource you're always going to get a complete choice for. And if you're only playing against somebody who is just trying to mess with you, they can't do it that way. So I do prefer that way of playing.
Yeah, it does kind of randomize it a little bit. And on the same note as well, there's a solo mode that I do quite like, and I get some chances to play it as well, because this is a game I end up playing by myself quite a bit. But you've got a solo mode where you use that same deck of cards, and it works almost exactly the same, where you're flipping over most of them. And both ways it randomizes it and makes for an interesting puzzle. And I think the puzzle is really it's the most fun part of the game. Well, it's really the game is you've got this puzzle that you've got to try and work out.
And it is nice that there are different options for each of the buildings in terms of how they score.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, each time maybe one game doesn't go your way, but the next time you just happen to be able to figure out the perfect combination of how they all work together. And you have each game, is it a monument that you build? And so that's your own personal building. And that's quite nice. I really like having that personal building that the other person has no idea what resources you need or want, so can't mess with you.
And it's really important to note, this game can be meaner than it looks on the front. So this is really for people who like that abstracted puzzle. and are okay with a game that is going to sometimes be frustrating and is going to sometimes be mean depending on who you're playing with.
But the production is quite nice. All of the buildings are very different looking, but it is like you said off the top. It implies that there will be animals involved. There are no animals.
They're on the cards. They're on some of the cards, but yeah, it's a very pretty wooden abstract game.
The next game is Cascadia, which is designed by Randy Flynn with art by Beth Sobel. And on your turn, you are drafting a landscape tile and an animal token. But they come out in 4 pairs. So each pair has one of the landscape tokens, tiles, and one of the animal tokens. So they may not necessarily be the tile you want with the right animal one, but you have to take one of them and you add that pair. So you add the landscape tile and then you put the animal token down on any icon that matches it. So it doesn't have to be the one that you just grabbed. And that's it. You keep adding your tiles and adding your animal tokens until the end of the game, and then you add up your landscape tiles for the biggest regions that you have for each of the different regions. And then the animals, they all score differently, and each of them have various scoring conditions that you can pull out. But generally, salmons score for a kind of run that they might make, for example, and foxes is usually about kind of which animals surround it. And each of them will score differently depending on which scoring cards come out, and then that's it.
So we did a larger review of this back when it came out, which was about a year ago. And this was one of our top games of that year as well. But a lot of these games, you talk big about at the time and everyone's really excited about them. But it's like, are you still playing this a year later? And yes, absolutely we are. We really haven't cooled on this one. It's just a terrific game. The Beth Sobel art is great. It looks so... it looks like the Pacific Northwest, and it's so inviting, and there's so much variance in those cards. I'd wondered if the simplicity of it would get a bit old because it is so simple and the gameplay is so quick, but because of those different scoring conditions, it switches up more than enough, I think, each game.
Yeah, even just the landscape that you're building, I find really rewarding of trying to figure that out. And it can be super satisfying if you manage to kind of get a huge mountain range of like 10 long or wide or whatever it is. And it's something about, we both really like games when you are building out something. And so when you look down at the end, it looks different every time you play it.
And it's of these 5 games too, I feel like it's kind of the chillest one. Like it's the one that you can play this with anybody. You can explain it super quickly. They're going to be just happy while playing it. There's an interesting puzzle, and there certainly are times when you've got that animal token and you're like, I don't know where to put it, but you get these little leaves, I feel like often enough, that actually allow you to choose a different token with a different tile. So it's so rare that you end up with an animal you just totally can't use.
And I think what helps with that is there is a rule that if 3 of the same kind of animal are on one of the 4 that you select, you can get rid of those 3 and draw new ones. So sometimes I'm really hoping that another one comes out because I'm like, no, I don't want any of those foxes. One more come out so I can just put them all away and try again. There usually is a way for it to come out, although someone is usually left with the foxes, which don't score as well.
I do wonder if there are other people who have a lot of success with the foxes, because they definitely tend to be the bottom for the interest that we have in the different animals. I go for bears. I really like getting bears first, and I go for salmon. And I think it's because I like having those 2 together because it feels like it makes a nice little tableau.
I go for those 2 as well. And we often just play against each other. So bears and salmon, as soon as one of them's out, it's gone, it's taken. They're
very, very popular. But the elk are fine as well. It's just, the foxes. I'm interested to know if anyone has had a lot of luck with foxes, and if we're missing out on their utility. And perhaps you can get a lot of points with foxes. I don't know. But this is definitely a game that is held up for us. The last one we're talking about is Calico. And Calico is designed by Kevin Russ with art by Beth Sobel. And like Cascadia, this is also made by Flat Out Games. And Calico is another tile placement game, although a more difficult one, I think famously so. So in Calico, you are making a quilt, and you're trying to make the nicest quilt that will attract all the best cats. So each turn, you're drafting one of 3 quilt tiles and you're putting it on your board. Well, you've actually got 2 in your hand. So you're drafting one, having that in your hand for a moment, looking at those 3 that you now have, and placing 1 down on your board. And what you're trying to do is, first of all, fill these different scoring conditions. So you've got 3 scoring conditions that you placed at the beginning of the game, and they're not necessarily going to be the same as the other player's scoring conditions. And they're going to have things like you need 3 of one different pattern and 3 of another different pattern, or 2, 2, and 2, or whatever that might be. And also 3 of a different color and 3 of another different color, or 2, 2, 2, or whatever that might be. And so you're trying to get both patterns and colors to match these 3 different scoring conditions, as well as make little sets of colors, which are going to allow you to add these little they're buttons that can come in kind of like Lucky Charms shapes and colors. And then at the end of the game, you're adding up both the scoring conditions that you've got on your board and all of the buttons you've got. And actually a third thing as well is the cats that you've managed to attract with your lovely quilt, because you've also got 3 cats that are out, and each one of those cats likes a different kind of pattern and a different shape for those patterns. They're very picky, as cats are, and each time you can make one of those pattern shapes, you can add one of those cats to your quilt as well.
And I think the thing to bear in mind is you really want to be successful in all of your scoring conditions. So you're really, really trying to make sure you get both the colors and the patterns around each of those, and you're trying to attract all of the cats, and you will never be able to do all of that.
Never.
So you have to be okay with that, and be all right with that time when you have to give up on something, you know. And the tricky thing with the cats, as well as the higher scoring cats, are a lot harder for those goals to accomplish. So it can be really tough if you come so close, but you just can't get the tile you need, or you have to put something else down instead to be able to kind of attract the higher scoring cat to your quilt.
Yeah, there's definitely, I've heard from folks who aren't fans of this game, and I feel like generally it's because they want everything to be perfect. They're perfectionists. They need to be able to solve this puzzle perfectly, and you can't. And I really like this game. And I think one of the reasons I like it is because I actually almost enjoy just being able, you know what? Screw it. I'm just not doing that part. That's fine. I'm going to do this other thing. And like the freedom of just, no, fine. You're not going to work this time. I'm focusing on this thing. And so you've got to be able to, it's almost like triage of like, what can I do first? What is going to be the easiest? What can I get done quickly? That is absolutely not what triage means, but it does mean that in the terms of cats and quilts. I've just invented that now.
But there certainly are those moments where you try and push your luck a little bit, where you think, okay, if I put this tile here, that's going to fulfill one of my center scoring conditions perfectly, but I'll be able to get a yellow button if I put it here, and I'm sure the tile that I need is still going to come up to go there. And then like 3 turns later, you're like, no, I should have put the other one over instead. You definitely have those tiles where you're like, oh, I just wish I could turn it back. But that is part of the fun of it.
In last game, I had one tile that would just be absolutely perfect. It was like a light blue polka dot. If I get this, it goes right in the middle of all 3 scoring conditions, and I've nailed it. And that did not come out. And I gave myself like 10 turns to get it too. And every turn was just like, oh no, oh no, oh no. So you really do have to play. You got to kind of play the odds.
But when it does come out, oh, it's really nice. And I think I like playing this 2 players especially, because people's turns are a bit long. You're just grabbing a tile, but the decision of which tile you take can take a little while as you try and figure it out. And you are able to have a little bit more information at 2 players, so the tiles don't change over as much. But that does mean that well, odds are that one that I also want might still be there by the time it's my turn again, whereas it'd be less likely at more players.
Yeah, I'd say if I were to rate these games heaviest to lightest, this would come the heaviest due to that decision space and how tricky that decision is, and how much of like your brain RAM you are using each turn. But that's our thoughts on AEG. So please let us know what you think about this format. We haven't done this before, but it is something, as we were looking around at our games thinking, we got 5 from this publisher, we got 6 or 7 from this publisher. So it is something that we may make a little bit of a series out of if people are interested to see more of these.
Yeah, it's a chance to cover some games that have been out for a little while. So do let us know in the comments if you're interested in that. Do let us know what your favorite AEG game is as well. And thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and hopefully see you for the next one.